Hello and welcome. This is the Marketplace, your choice for business. And on the program today, we're going to look at a lot of things, including your business and how global development impacting it on the marketplace. Yeah, all these are more here on the marketplace. On the program today, we're looking at stakeholders exploring solutions for AGR business opportunities at the maiden edition of Joy Business Talks held in Accra, and also government to raise up to almost about $1 billion Ghana cedis from investors through the issuance of 5-year bonds. All these are more here on the marketplace. But you can stay interactive and be part of it. Our Twitter handle, if you want to tweet, is Joy Business GH, and on Facebook we are just simply at Joy Business. For more, you can log on to myjoyonline.com/business. My name is John Kojo. Marketplace returns shortly after the break. You're welcome back. And in our first story, government will today be trying to raise up to about $1 billion Ghana cedis from investors. It will be doing this by issuing a 5-year bond. But at what cost could this increase the country's rising public debt? Geography has been looking at this particular story and has come through with this report.
The fundraising, which will not be done the usual way, that is it being managed by the Bank of Ghana. This is because government is now looking at a new and more efficient way of raising these funds, which has been christened the book building approach. 3 financial institutions, that is Barclays, Stanbic and Finance House Strategic African Securities, will be managing this exercise. These institutions will today open the book to accept bids and price codes from institutional investors and fund managers who are interested in lending to government at a specific interest rate. The exercise, unlike previous ones, will last for 2 days. Government has already given itself a range which is willing to accept these funds or borrow from investors, that is between 23 to 25%. Proceeds from the bond sale will be used to finance debts that are maturing. However, the concern here for many industry watchers is about how this would go a long way to increase the public debt, which has reached 105 billion Ghana cedis as at May this year. But the Finance Ministry, on the other hand, have argued that these bonds would rather go a long way to reduce the public debt. But economist John Kwachi disagrees.
If you borrow 100, you go up 100, and then you pay 100, you come back to the same level. If that's what they were just doing. But not all the borrowings go to pay off existing debt. Some of them are also used for various projects and so on. So it's additional debt. Of course, part of it goes to refinance existing debt, but it also creates additional debt.
Government is planning to raise about 60 billion Ghana cedis through the issuance of bonds and treasury bills for this year. It has already been able to raise about half of this.
And the Central Bank of Ghana has directed banks that are heavily affected by the increasing non-performing loans to top up their capital. This, according to the regulator, will prevent affected banks from undue pressure from environmental shocks. According to the data published by the regulator on non-performing loans in the books of some banks have seen significant increase, almost to the tune of about 4 billion Ghana cedis, a condition they attribute to huge debt owed by oil importing companies. Even though there's been steps by government to convert these debt to bonds, the governor of the central bank, Dr. Ishaku Desiru, prefers banks to be proactive by recapitalizing.
The bank had initiated an asset quality review exercise, essentially looking at the loan books, the loan portfolio of all the banks. We have been supervising the banks under a certain assessment framework against our prudential norms. But this exercise was stricter than normal. What that required was to look at, reclassify all their accounts, all their assets, and in that process, some of them were reclassified to higher levels of impairment. Because you had some loans sitting on the books of banks, largely state-owned loans, but because government is seen as, it doesn't default, so they were not being provided for. under the old classification system. But with this new stricter classification, for example, guarantees of government were downgraded. In other words, they were elevated to a higher level of impairment, and banks are required to provide for those. So that is really why the NPLs levels have gone up. That explains why it's gone up. But there is some restructuring process ongoing right now where government is committed to paying down the debt. And when that happens, that will strengthen the balance sheet of the banks.
Now, more on this issue of non-performing loans. Joining us on the phone to discuss this is Nana Oto Achampa, who also happens to be the Executive Secretary of the Second Center for Education and Research. Joining. And Nana, you're welcome to the marketplace.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What is this about non-performing loans and the need for banks to recapitalize in Ghana? Can you take us through this journey so then we look at the implications of it?
Well, banks are required under Section 23 of the Banking Act of 2004 to maintain what you call capital adequacy. And at all times, the minimum is set at 10%. Therefore, if a bank gets into a situation where, because of non-performing loans, their capital is under threat, then the Section 24 of the same Act requires them to raise additional capital to bring them to this 10% minimum. So, because non-performing loans effectively affect the capital structure of any bank financial institution, and so that is what the relationship between the minimum capital you have to maintain versus the non-performing loans that you may have on your books.
Okay, now let's also look at it from this. So, because at a point, even though it's non-performing, it's not something that they are writing off. There's this expectation that government is actually going to pay back, and more to the point where the government is doing so well after we are hearing also that they are trying as much as possible to convert these loans to bonds. I'm sure by now it's even been done because we spoke to the MPA and they made assertions to that particular effect. So why is it that dangerous to the banks in keeping this? Because as we also know that bonds are considered as assets to the banking in the balance sheets of the bank. So why that?
Yes. Now the issue at stake is very simple. There are two types of loans, either loan to government or loan to the private sector. The loans you are referring to, I presume, are the loans to government. Now, loans to government...
not necessarily loans to government per se, but loans extended by the banks to the BDCs, that's the bulk oil distribution companies, or the importers of oil or crude oil to the country. But they were guaranteed by government at a point in time.
Therefore, it becomes a government debt, isn't it? I mean, if the guarantees is as good as the loan themselves. So
largely, you're right.
By government, yes. Because I saw you for a moment, you were talking about the VRA loan, which is also a loan that is owned by government, because VRA is 100% owned by the state. Now, if you're talking about the bulk oil debt, which if they have been underwritten by government, then effectively they are government loans. And so to turn them into bonds, and this is not the first time, it's been done before when we had the loan stock at Tema Oil Refinery. That was turned into bonds to enable GCB receive the exposure or reduce the exposure that they had to the company. So in the same way, if there are some outstanding loans due to the bulk oil companies, and now the government has given guarantees, then turning them into bonds is a way of giving them capital to be able to boost up their capital adequacy that they may find in their books being eroded by these loans.
Okay. Now, let's also look at it from this perspective, the situation where people are asking, is it the appropriate time? Because we do know the system. One, what really gives banks the cheaper sources of funding is deposit, which according to the bank, they're saying is not enough. and therefore they would have to resort to other sources of raising capital, which includes those that are listed. I mean, they're going to the stock market to raise some capital from there. Others are also looking at the Europe bond market to also look at that. Is it a good time to really raise capital to augment the bank's capital?
Well, which any time is as good as ever, in the sense that if a bank finds itself in a situation where their capital is being eroded, then they have to find ways and means, irrespective of the time structure, to boost up so that they don't fall below the 10% minimum that has been set.
But the issue is, you raise capital. Capital also comes with cost, and all these costs that are passed over or are passed on to the consumer, that's you and I, whether individuals or corporate entities, they are passed on. The reason why I ask that question is that at the international market, in the event banks decide to look at that particular market to raise money, I mean, interest rate is quite high. There are a lot of uncertainty surrounding the market and all. So what exactly is it that we're going to have? Are we going to see some interest rate increase here in Ghana?
Well, I mean, not from the perspective of the banks, because they don't have control over what interest rates are set. But on the issue of whether this is the right time because the cost is going to be high, you balance that against the alternative of not issuing the bonds or not raising capital to boost your the buffer that you have. The alternative is it could cause the collapse of the institution. So it's cheaper to go for a higher interest rate and stay in business than to do the opposite, not to issue and then go out of business. So it's on the cost-benefit basis, it's cheaper to raise the bonds now to pay for to fill the gap in your capital structure.
Okay, we thank you very much, Nana Otuachampong, for your time here. Nana Otuachampong is a banking consultant and also an executive member of the Second Center for Education and Research here in Ghana. In other stories, in Ghana, modernization of agriculture has only become a lip service because successive governments have failed to show much commitment to the sector. Despite the existence of several institutions and arrangements to improve the fortunes of the sector, real benefits have still eluded the nation. About 400 million Ghana cedis is being lost to post-harvest losses. To help address the entrenched challenges of agriculture and to proffer some solutions, Joy Business, in collaboration with Busy, organized the maiden edition of the Agribusiness Forum at the Alicia Hotel in Accra on Tuesday. Sheila Tamaklo coming through with this report.
A number of stakeholders in the agri sector were present at the Joy Business Busy Talks to deliberate on key issues plaguing the sector. Deputy Minister for the agri sector, Alhaji Alhassan Ahmed Yakubu, was the first to take the bite on the issues. He sought to quell the notion that the agri sector is on a sharp decline. His position was that the manufacturing sector is feeding on the agri sector in a way that although production is high, it is not captured under agri, but rather manufacturing.
It's true that the contribution of agriculture to the totality of the GDP has been coming down of recent, and many people seem to be concerned and regard it as a negative. Unfortunately for us who are in the sector, we are extremely happy that we are contributing less, because it means that we are victims of our own success. Just to give a small example to illustrate the point, this country needs 1 million tons of maize to feed its population. For many, many years now, and around 500,000 metric tons to feed livestock and poultry. For many, many years now, we've been inching towards 2 million metric tons. Now, some of the 2 million tons is going into beer production. That means that we are contributing to beer production, but we will not be registered as, what do I call it? When you are doing the GDP calculations, what is going into the brewery will not be seen as an agricultural effort. It will be seen as either a manufacturing or an industrial effort. And that is the situation we find ourselves.
Another panelist from the Africa Center for Economic Transformation, Dr. Bob Watting, impressed that the improvement of productivity in the agriculture sector would go a long way to reduce the impacts of poverty in the country. He also added that proper agro-processing can serve as a remedy for post-harvest losses.
For an economy to transform, we need to improve productivity in the two major productive sectors, which is agriculture and manufacturing. And then we have T, which is technological advancement, which is very important. And if you are able to improve productivity in agriculture, you will then be able to reduce poverty.
Degrees Salon Brantier impressed on stakeholders the need to see agriculture for how it contributes to the GDP and not just for what it puts on the table. He also advised the introduction of basic technology to be used to improve efficiency.
My thought process on how we see agriculture is not that it should be seen as producing just food crops that will put food on the table, but we should look at agriculture in terms of how much does it add to the GDP. Like he was saying, there has been a 100% increase in maize production. But what does it mean for the farmer if everybody is moving into the service sector? Agriculture has lost that productive edge that it once had, that made it such that it was a means of, not just livelihood or sustainability, but a means to an end where they can also assert themselves as living as the way they want to be. Is because we have divorced the concept of agriculture as something that should be something that should make people live their dreams, and then have made it something that's just, let's just put food on the table. What about concentrating some of the effort into other crops or other agricultural activity that will then generate much more income than just maize or yams or bananas or plantain?
The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research rep on the panel, Dr. Charles Toto, also encouraged financial institutions to lend more support to agro-businesses.
It comes back with support. If our financial institutions will support some of these young entrepreneurs. Under one of our projects, which we call the West Africa Agriculture Productivity Program, we have a clear-cut investors forum where these technology developed under the projects. And basically on root and tubers, we talk about yam, cassava, water yam, cocoa yam, value-added products coming from all these crops. These technologies are spelled out to investors. Now the question is, who is there to support the investor to have that small agribusiness to start adding value at the point of production? This is where the challenge is. This is where we need support to push more into the agribusiness sector, and then we can say we have value-added product.
Agro Mindsets David Esiama also stressed on the need to make agro services available to farmers.
Well, it's about efficiencies, because the human factor has limits. I'll give you a good example. We went into a project to cultivate something, but then we didn't realize that there will be a prolonged harmattan. Anybody realized that it took about 3 to 4 months or 5 months to have rains? If we had had access to information that it wouldn't rain, we wouldn't embark on that project. We were looking at maybe good money because the rains delayed. If we had timely information, back in the UK, a farmer has access to the weather pattern for over 40 years, for over 80 years, and usually the pattern repeats itself every 35 years. So they can make some predictions. Although there's climate change, they can make some predictions and know what's happening.
From the conversations, it was clear that though the agri sector faces some challenges, agribusiness in developing enhanced value chains to produce the best of quality products cannot be underestimated.
And that was a report fired by Sheila Tamaklova, Business Tech. Marketplace is taking a short break. We are back after this. Welcome back. And the Vice Chairman of the Ghana National Poultry Farmers Association, Ajiman Odro, has criticized government for not having the political will to address issues concerning post-harvest losses in the agricultural sector. He said Ghana could take a cue from other countries which have banned the importation of certain agricultural products and are implementing policies that will enhance the consumption of local goods rather than importing them from Europe.
We produce with the intention that yes, we can sell. So if you produce and you cannot sell, who again would you attract into the same industry? Come into the poultry industry, we have about 95% of the chicken that we consume coming outside the country. So who are we going to attract to the poultry industry again? We're only producing about 5%. Like I said, we have discussed this over and over again, but we are still experiencing the same situation every day and every time.
What do you want government to do?
I want government to really exercise the political will to do that. Like I said earlier, the poultry situation with regards to meat, Nigeria has done it, and today they are smiling. Cote d'Ivoire has done it. Today they are smiling. Why can't we? It took political will of these two countries to really get to where they are today. So we need the political will of this country. The leaders must really express their willingness to get things done for us in the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, too.
The Bank of Ghana has initiated steps towards finding a lasting solution to the long-standing challenge with funding faced by players in the agri sector. The central bank is to learn from and implement some innovative ways other than in other African countries like Nigeria have successfully employed in addressing the issue. The second deputy governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson Esiama, revealed this at the maiden edition of the Joy Business Busy Talk on agribusiness yesterday.
It is of concern to us. Currently, financing that goes to agriculture is just about 4% of the entire financing. And so we want to see how to double this within the next couple of years to about 8% of financing. As I indicated, we are interested in the very innovative schemes. So we've looked at this scheme called GESAL. In Nigeria, they call it NESAL. What it does is, it is a sort of guarantee scheme to which the central bank and the banks contribute, so that that fund is used to support lending to agriculture.
Now, what would you do if you were giving a number of goats as an inheritance? Well, the young entrepreneur Gideon Paddy Konote found himself in that particular situation and decided to take up the challenge of not only rearing these goats to sell, but adding some value. He's now the CEO of Goat Masters. Exactly how does he add value? Here's an excerpt of what to expect on today's edition of the Joy Business Van.
So this is where my grandparents started it.
Gideon leads me to an inheritance from his grandparents. The goats were virtually pushed on Gideon since nobody wanted them after his grandparents died. Then an idea came to mind, to move from just rearing the goats to adding value to them.
After the goats have been butchered, we bring it here to process some into kebab and then also some into packaged meat, like in 1 pound, in the pounds, and then in kilos for our customers who order for the day.
It was not an easy beginning for Gideon, who was then a graphic designer, to take up this new challenge. As he recalls, he was sometimes laughed at.
People meet you, they're like, Charlie, oh, this guy is smelling. But I know what I'm looking for.
And do make a date this afternoon at 1 p.m. right after the Joy Business Report. And also, today's Wednesday on Business Live, you're catching that particular action live there at 5 and all. So this will be the business one. The Goat Masters will be in action there. So in other development or in other story, Chief Executive of the Consumer Protection Agency, Kofi Kapito, is criticizing government for failing to pay its long outstanding debt with the Electricity Company of Ghana. He's of the view that the company has all the means to stand on its feet if only government will service its huge debt. Kofi Kapito spoke to Joy Business after a news conference in Accra to demand the publication of load-shedding timetable from the Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission.
If government can commit and pay its bill on time, as you and I pay our bill, the money issue would not be too much of a problem for ECG. They might have other issues like the term they use is commercial and technical losses. That one, maybe we can look at it. In terms of revenue collection, the only challenge that they have is collecting money from government. You and I, we pay our bill and we pay it on time, especially with the introduction of prepaid. So why is the consumer being blamed, or ECG being looked as the bad guy? Yes, like I said, they have their own internal issues that they need to look at. Response to faults, making sure that transformers are quickly fixed, replaced, and all that. I think we can deal with it.
And that was Kofi Capito bringing us to the end of today's edition of the Marketplace. You can stay interactive with us on Twitter. We are located at Joy Business GH, and on Facebook it's Joy Business. For more business stories, you can go on to myjoyonline.com/business. My name is John Kojo. I'm welcome. Have a very wonderful afternoon.